Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the stream. If we haven't met yet, my name is Johnny. I'm one of the founders here at Worship Sound Guy, and I am so excited that you have joined us today. We're going to talk about mixing strategy, new year, new mix. That's kind of what I'm calling it. I think it's going to be really fun. I think you're going to learn a ton. I've got a bunch of people on here already, which is amazing. Thank you guys for being on time for this stuff and taking time out of your day to learn and to grow, to get better as a mixer. I think that's amazing that all of you are on here to do that. So incredible. All right, so before we get started here, just a super quick plug. This stream is part of our insiders group. You can check it out at worshipsoundguy.com/insiders. You can join the group, and basically, like, you get access to all these different streams and stuff. You get access to all the replays. You'll get access to all the like multi-tracks that we use, all this kind of stuff. And it's very, very cool. It's an incredible resource if you're a church sound engineer who wants to get better at what you do. This is one of the best ways to do it. And I just want to pitch that for a minute just before we get started here. I think it's going to be a huge help for you. If you want to learn more about that, you can go over to worshipsoundguy.com/insiders. We also have all kinds of online courses, presets for your favorite digital mixing consoles, all kinds of good stuff that's really going to help you out. So if you haven't checked that out yet and you're liking what we do, make sure you check that stuff out. Also, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That really helps us out, helps more people find what we're doing. All right, so you guys ready to get started? Because I sure am. Let's go ahead and jump over into Pro Tools. All right, so let me actually just kind of talk about what we're going to be looking at here and why. So I've realized that the new year just seems like a good time to kind of reevaluate what we're doing as audio engineers, how we approach our mixing, maybe some changes that we want to make. And, you know, it's great to make changes anytime, but I feel like the new year is like a fresh start. And for me, that's kind of fun to just get in there and like try to experiment with some stuff and try some new things. So what I've done is essentially set up Pro Tools just like my console at church. The reason I'm showing you within Pro Tools is because it's a lot easier for me to demonstrate. I can make, you know, awesome plugins, all like full screen and stuff, make it very easy for us to see. So that's some cool stuff, but just keep in mind, like, you know, you might see this and go, whoa, wait a minute, this is not, you know, the console that I'm using. Don't worry about it. Everything I'm going to show you here is going to translate exactly to your console. So do not worry if it looks a little bit different. I'll talk through everything just in case there's something you're not familiar with. But especially if you're maybe, you know, using Pro Tools or another DAW, maybe for your streaming mix, this is going to look right at home for you. And maybe there's even some additional things you can copy from this into those kinds of mixes. Or if you're, you know, mixing a live album that your church has recorded, like steal this stuff. That's what we're here for. But I'm going to walk through routing, all that stuff in just a second, because that's a big part of what we're doing. But first, let me just talk about what tends to happen over the course of a year and why I kind of like wanted to reevaluate this. So my approach to mixing is very systematic. I keep a little like notebook where I will jot down ideas and try to improve things week to week, making little tweaks and changes, trying to like improve my template, get everything, you know, like really, really dialed in as much as I possibly can. However, one thing I realized is that the law of entropy still applies. Like, things move from order to disorder, and that's just a natural thing that happens. And I've noticed that happening within my mix and my template, kind of especially over the last like few months, like heading into the Christmas season. I was like making some tweaks to my template. I was like, wow, this is really getting a little bit messy. Maybe I need to reevaluate the way I do some things. And so that's what kind of started this journey for me. And it's been really productive. So I'll say that. So I think it's very much worth it to try to reevaluate why you're doing the things that you're doing. And the new year seems like a great time to do that, and certainly has been for me so far. And so I want to share some of the stuff that I've learned with that and some of the things I'm doing differently now that I've actually like really never done before. So one of the things that I noticed that was happening was, sometimes like you're mixing and you need to go really quickly. And so you reach for a processor, EQ, compression, effect, whatever, and you're trying to like solve a problem very, very fast. And you put these little band-aids over issues in your mix. Like you're like, oh man, my vocal's not bright enough. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna, maybe grab an EQ really quickly, throw it on there, tweak something, add something in waves. And, maybe you're like, okay, that worked. I'm going to add that to my template. And then the problem happens where those things start building up and you get these like just layers and layers of little band-aid fixes that sort of compile and compound in your mix. And so what I noticed for me, I was like, I would like look over my Waves Super Rack session and be like, wow, this is a lot sometimes on, especially on certain inputs, where I was just trying to make these quick changes. And I was in the moment able to solve the problem, whatever I was hearing, and it got to where it needed to be. But I started evaluating, like, is this the most elegant way to do this? Is this the simplest solution? And so as I was going through my template, I was like, man, it's really not. And there's a lot of stuff I was doing that was sort of multiple steps of processing where I was like, I think I can combine this into one processor or do this more efficiently, mix more efficiently and faster. And so that's a lot of what I want to show here, as well as some new ways that I'm approaching routing. And that is probably one of the biggest changes I'm actually making, is the way I'm processing groups. So there's a guy who mixes over at Elevation. I'm blanking on his name right now. I'll link him down in the notes later for the replay. But he posted a video about, basically his thing was time aligning groups into groups within a Digico console. It was very like kind of niche thing. But I've got a Digico console at my home church, and I was like, oh, this is good. I'm gonna watch this, see what he's got to say about it. And basically it was that, each subsequent group adds a little bit more delay to it. So you have to like compensate for that in some way, especially within Waves. You gotta get everything lined up to keep everything in phase. So like, that's great. But the thing that really stuck out to me that he was talking about was the way he treats groups of mics that are all on the same source. So like, for example, kick mics. Maybe you've got a kick in, a kick out, and a kick sub. You've got like 3 mics on the kick, or, a couple mics on snare, several cymbal mics, couple, mics on a guitar amp, whatever it is. And he was talking about grouping those together and treating them as one. And I've seen that concept around before, but something about the way he explained it just really made a lot of sense. Like he was talking about how, we're not mixing, let's say, 3 individual kick mics. We're mixing one kick drum that happens to have 3 mics on it, for example. And even kind of like pushing that idea further, like we're not mixing, 4 or 5 individual drums and 5 individual cymbals. We're mixing one drum kit. So doesn't it make sense to process those things with that in mind, and maybe get a little more intentional about the processing that we put onto our groups, and like maybe treating those like multiple mic sources as one thing, rather than as like multiple individual things. And so I started experimenting with that, and it's just made a massive difference. So, okay, really quickly, let me jump over here. I'm gonna, let me get my video out of the way here so we can kind of see how this mixer is laid out and what everything looks like. So this, I'll walk you through really quickly. This is a live multi-track from my home church that I did this weekend. So literally just fresh off of this Sunday. So we can really get an idea of what we're working with here. We've got all of our drums. We've got kick in, kick out, and we do run a kick sample. Get to that shortly. Got a snare top, snare bottom, and snare sample. 3 toms on this kit, pair of stereo overheads in a spaced pair. We have bass guitar, no synth bass, or no live synth bass this week. We have 2 stereo electric guitars and an acoustic guitar. 1 keyboard this week, keeping it pretty simple. A few channels of tracks, and then 5 vocalists, and then down here, some headsets and handhelds and room mics. So this is everything I think you probably typically find within, just a standard kind of worship mix. And I thought this would be like very representative of what a lot of us deal with on a regular basis. So let's jump over here, and I'm going to show you some big differences in how I'm setting up kind of my routing and processing with this. So we're starting over here with our 3 kick channels. We have kick in, kick out, and kick sample. The kick in is an SE Electronics BL8, very much like a Shure like Beta 91, if you're familiar with that little flat mic inside the kick. Outside is an Audix D6, and the kick sample is being triggered off of a Roland TM2. It's like a 2-channel little trigger unit that we use. Then snare top has got the Lawton Audio snare mic on it, which sounds great. Snare bottom's a 57, and then a snare sample. Then we have 3 toms, all with the Lawton tom mic on it. We then have overheads with the Warm Audio WA14, which is kind of a clone of the AKG C414, which is a fantastic mic, and the Warm Audio version of it is really, really excellent. Okay, going through channels, we've got our bass DI, we got our 2 electrics, both going DI, acoustic, also DI, keys DI, tracks going over network, and then 5 vocals, which are all on DPA, I think it was 2028 capsules, whatever the not super expensive one is. Room mics are the Lawton Audio LA120. So that's all of our input channels. And then what I decided to do to kind of change stuff up here was previously I was doing sort of, what you might expect of like running all my drums into a drum group. And all my, like guitars into a guitar group, keys into a keys group, like using lots of groups kind of like across individual sort of sections of instruments. And what I realized, I was like, what is really important here with these different groups? And I came down to I was like, what is like essential? And so I decided it's going to be a drum group. I've got one that's drum dry and one that's like a drum, like a compressed one that's like a parallel compression. Then everything else, so big change here. So all of the band that's not drums is going into one group. It's like a band group. So that's all the bass, all the electric guitars, acoustic guitars, keys, tracks, everything that is not drums or vocals goes to one group. It's down here, just called band. Then vocals all go to their own group. And then the vocals, the band, and the drum groups go to my main left, right, and my stream. So it's a pretty simple routing layout when it comes down to it. And for me, I think that I think it's going to help to really simplify things. And honestly, I think it sounds better. So on top of that, the other big change that I made is grouping together some of these microphones that are on the same source. So I've got a group, like a stereo group, with all my kick mics going into it. I've got a stereo group with all my snare channels going into it. I've got a stereo group with all my toms going into it. I've got another stereo group with my overheads and what would be other cymbal mics going into it. I may add some other cymbal mics. We'll see. TBD on that. Right now, just to keep it consistent, I wanted to have a group for that. So I put overheads in that. So when it comes down to it, so within those drums, we've got just one group channel that's going to have all my kick stuff going through it. One group that's going to have all my snare stuff going through it. One group for all the toms, one group for all the cymbals. And I think that's going to make it a lot easier to mix that way. And the other thing that I realized was I wanted to kind of cut down some of my reliance on waves, especially on like individual channels. So with this, what I decided to do was to do all my basic processing on these like individual channels, like, kick in, kick out, kick sample. I wanted to do that all on the console. So EQ, gates, compression, I want to keep that all in the console, whereas before I've been sending a lot of that stuff out to waves. After that though, Where I do want to use some wave stuff is on the group channels. I want to process all that together in waves as one unit. Like remember, we're talking about, we're not mixing 3 separate kick mics, we're mixing one kick drum. So I think it really makes sense to apply the processing that's like really like kind of giving the tone as one unit. I want to apply that just to that group. And that's going to save not only on waves processing, but also just kind of on the complexity of the setup. So I'm not like looking for, potentially like processing on the console, then it goes to waves, then it goes to a group, then it goes to another group. It's just like at a certain point, it gets so much that just seems kind of unnecessary. And as I was working with these tracks, I realized that I was correct in that assumption. And a lot of that did end up being unnecessary. And having it work within groups just seems to me to work a lot better. So I'm going to walk through the processing that I'm doing and kind of how I'm like laying this out. Let's jump around a little bit here. Jump over to my track window here. We had like 4 songs on Sunday. I'm sure. So yeah, let's start with this one. So we did Same God, the Mav City song, and it's got some fun stuff in it. Let's kind of listen to that for just a sec. Whose favor rests upon the lonely. I know with you all things are possible. Let's jump to a big part. Okay, so I think that's feeling like a pretty good like starting point for things. And so this is with like the processing all kind of applied here within Pro Tools. And I'm gonna kind of approach this a little bit differently. I'm gonna actually start with my master processing. So since we're doing so much with groups, I wanted to start there and kind of show you like how this group processing strategy kind of works. So right now, okay, so you guys are hearing this channel over here, this stream channel, and the way I've got this whole Pro Tools template set up, so every single channel has got up at the top here, like in these first like 3 inserts, so these are like first 3 like processors right here. So I've got an EQ, I've got a gate, and I've got a compressor. So just like you would find on your actual console, just, very basic, nothing crazy here. These are all FabFilter plugins, but they're very representative of what you'd find on like a typical mixing console. They're super clean. They're not doing anything to like color the sound or impart some like crazy, magic dust to it. It's just very straightforward EQ, gate, and compression. After that, on my next set of 5 inserts, that's where waves is gonna live. So if I'm going to send something to waves, I'm putting those inserts in this area. So you can see like on vocals right here, we've got like our console processing at the top and then our waves processing down here. And I know, as you kind of scroll through, there's a lot of channels going to waves. Actually, I took some notes here. Let's see. But I didn't. Oh, there they are. Okay. So we ended up with... So a total of 8 groups, 5 aux sends, 2 mains or matrices, which are over here for my stream, and main left, right, and then 22 channels going through waves. So all things considered, not a ton. I was running, I think, probably 40 channels of waves previously. So this is really going to cut down a lot on where we've ended up with that. And I'm pretty happy about that. I think simplifying those kinds of setups is a good thing to do. And this kind of allows us to do that. So anyway, as we're watching here, just keep in mind anything I'm opening right here on these 3 top processors, that's like my console processing. Anything that's coming from down here is waves processing. And then below that are like sends for reverb and delay and stuff like that. So let's work backwards and we're going to see kind of what we're doing on the master channel to get everything like really tightened up. So I'm going to go ahead, play the mix. So actually I'll show you first. How about that? Okay. So first up, You go ahead and make this full screen so we can see everything. So we've got an EQ over here doing absolutely nothing. That was just kind of a final reference point. The very last thing that's actually doing something in the chain is the L3 low latency multi-maximizer. Basically, this is just a limiter. It's not going to hit it like hardly at all. You'll see that in a minute here. We've got the PuigTech EQ that's adding 2 dB at 60 hertz and a little bit above 3 dB at 10K. Before that, we have Vitamin. This is kind of like a harmonic enhancer exciter from Waves that I really, really like. There's this one particular preset, it's the Hugo Pizon FOH Asteroid. Don't know what that means, but it sounds awesome. I literally have just loaded up that preset and it sounds great. And then first in the chain is the Abbey Road TG mastering chain, the live version. I'm using that for just a little bit of EQ, mostly, yeah, high and low end EQ. And then I'm adding a little bit of presence and using this stereo spreader for a little bit of width. This is something I might use it in the room, like in the PA system live, but definitely for this stream, it would get this. So the only thing that might change for me for my actual like in-room mix, I might disable this, we'll see. Okay, let's go through. I'm gonna turn all these off. So we're bypassing all this stuff. Let me just open it up so we can see everything all together. Kind of get them in order here. Okay. And we're gonna start enabling stuff. Also worth noting, there's nothing on the console processing here. Everything is empty there. I just didn't feel the need to use it. I felt like I was getting what I wanted out of Waves, and that was good enough for me. Okay, so I'm gonna play it, and we're going to enable these one by one. You'll see the little bypass button turn from orange to gray. That means it's enabled. So orange means it's disabled. So right now everything's disabled. Let's take a listen. There we go. And you can see on the Waves loudness meter here, we're hitting somewhere around like -10, -9 LUFS on that. That's probably fine. I could even back this threshold up on the limiter if we want to, but I think for streaming over YouTube, that's probably a good spot to be. So we'll kind of leave it there. So let's talk about this for a minute, because this is probably the most complex chain of processing that I've got on the mix right now. And even that, like it's not so crazy. It's only 4 things. So what I like to do with this is really just adding a small amount of improvement at each step here. And I want it to be doing very intentional things. I don't have a lot of like duplicate processing. So like with this, we're getting a little bit of EQ, a little bit of this compression, a little bit of the stereo spreader. This is getting harmonics, kind of like a little bit of saturation, excitement stuff going on. This is giving us a little bit of polish, especially in that top end. There's nothing quite like this PuigTech EQ on that. And then finally, obviously limiting. So I'm going to leave all of that on as I go through the rest of the mix, just so that we're not like, you know, jumping volume level or anything like that. So that's kind of why I want to show you that first, just because that's going to stay on as we listen to like individual sources and individual stuff over here. So let's jump into the good stuff here. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and we're going to start with drums. Let's listen to where we're at there. That was a good little spot. Good on volume. Just let me know if anything, you know, you're not hearing anything enough or anything like that. And you hear something more, just drop that in the chat. Just let me know. Okay, so I think this is sounding pretty great as a drum mix. So let's go through and kind of dissect what's happening here and how it's happening a little bit differently as opposed to how I might have approached this even just last year. So let's start with the kick. I think that's a great place to start. Let's take a listen to our kick in mic. Okay. It's just a very solid kick. Oh, the other thing, let's do this. I'm going to disable the little bit of waves processing that I have on the kick group. As we listen to these individual inputs, I just want you to hear what I'm doing on the console. So let's go ahead, let's listen to where we started and where we ended up here. So I'm disabling the processing on that kick. Okay. It sounds like a kick-in mic. Nothing special, but also nothing bad. The gain is set at the right level. That's probably one of the most important things you can do to get stuff off to a good start. After that, though, whereas before, I think my kick-in chain, I had like the SSL, SSL channel and waves on there. I had the Shep's Omni channel doing some saturation. I think I had like an F6 on there to kind of clean some stuff up. So it was a lot of processing. And some compression too. So just a lot of processing on that one individual mic. And I was doing that on like each of the kick channels. And not that it didn't sound good, but it was just really complicated. So I was like, okay, how good can I make this sound with just the basic stuff that you've got on your console? So to start with, I opened up an EQ and I was listening to it, and make sure this is on. Yep, we're good. Okay. So I started off, I'm gonna disable these. I only made 2 cuts on this thing. So I'm gonna turn these off. Here's where we started. And the first thing that I noticed was just some woofiness in kind of this low mid area. So check this out. Oh, didn't want to grab both of them. Let's undo that. Okay, so yeah, this first one here, I don't know why it's grabbing both. That's weird. There we go. Okay, so this range right here, it has a weird resonance in it that I wasn't liking. So I pulled that out, and immediately it just tightened up the kick drum a ton. And then the other thing I noticed was this clacky top end. Just kind of has this like chippy, chirpy kind of sound to it. There's just, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a limitation of the mic or something like that. But I just need to reduce that a little bit. And to me, I was like, that's really all I need on that. The other thing I was like, okay, I've got to have a gate. So pulled in my console gate, and we had a question from RJ Bush in the comments talking, could you explain about gate functionality? Yes. So gates are really, really simple. It's basically just turning down the volume when it's not loud. So the not loud thing in this case is the space between the kick hits. So when he's not hitting the kick, it should be a lot quieter. Just like it is now, you can kind of see the little like quiet waveform happening here. And so what I want to do is reduce the volume in between those hits. I want the gate to open up and allow the full volume when he hits the kick, and I want to close down and reduce that volume when he's not hitting the kick. So all I did, just set my threshold until it was opening on the kick hits, attack as fast as it can go, release around 100 milliseconds. That's generally a good spot for me. And you can see that just opening nice and easily there on every kick hit. And it might catch a little something else, something else bleeds in. It's not a big deal. So I will say this, one of the biggest changes that I've made here is the range. I'm reducing this, like the quiet parts of this when the gate is not open, I'm reducing it by 15 dB. Previously, I was making it go like silent in between hits. And the more I listened to it, the more I felt like that just didn't sound natural. It just sounds weird. It sounded like the kick was just sort of isolated from the rest of the kit. And I didn't want that. I wanted it to feel more natural. So you'll notice on all of these, if I jump over to the kick out mic, which we'll listen to in a second, it's doing the exact same thing. It's about 15 dB. So for me, that just felt a lot more natural and a lot more realistic for the kit as a whole, like everything working together and sounding natural. So, okay, very simple. No no compression, 0 compression on that kick in mic. Then let's listen to our kick out in solo really quick, then we'll put it all together. Okay, so same deal here. I heard some woofiness in the low mids around 112. I heard just kind of some resonance and some bleed from the rest of the kit around that 400 range. This mic is like right inside the hole in the front of the kick drum, so it kind of picks up some other stuff around the kit. And then again, kind of this little plasticky, snappy stuff up in the top end here. And let's listen to that. Turn the gate off, turn that EQ off. Turn that up just a little bit for you. Sounds good. Then we turn on our EQ. And it sounds so much tighter. So here's off. Kind of woofy. Then on. Instantly tightens it. And to me, just getting to listen to that and getting to really dial in on what the kick actually needed, as opposed to just like slapping a bunch of, Waves Band-Aids over it, that really, really helped. And I realized like, this is all I need to do to this mic to get it sounding really good. Our gate is exactly the same, just opening up in between, or 4 kick hits and closing down in between about 15 dB. So let's mix those two together. Sounds really good. Let me get to the part of the song where he's playing a little more consistently. Yeah, so that feels really good. Feels nice and big. It's got like some nice mid-range to it, not like woofy mid-range. And then I did blend in our kick sample. This is just more of a roomy sample. Let's just hear it on its own really quick. You'll notice it is turned down like almost 10 dB from the other ones. Sounds like that. It's kind of knocky, I guess is my way to describe it. And it just makes the kick feel like it has a little more space to it as opposed to just being very direct. That's what I like if I'm going to trigger something. I want it to give a sense of space and width to it, even if it's something like the kick. So all 3 of those together sound like this. And like, honestly, that's already a really, really good kick sound. I was like, just this basic processing has got it to a point where I don't feel like I need to do that much. Like I don't need a chain of 8 plugins and waves to get it sounding cool. So the things that I was noticing, the things I wanted to work on were just a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression. So for this, I decided not to do anything. So this is the kick group that we're talking about now. And I decided not to do anything on the console. I decided to send it out to Waves. So I'm adding the 550B EQ and I'm adding some 10K to that. And what I really like about this, I'm taking away some 240 hertz and adding a little 50 hertz. And this is just to like thicken the kick, bring a little more clarity to it with that low mid cut, and then getting that top end to really cut through as much as I needed to. So the reason I like this EQ for it is because it does have some vibe to it. It's just like a little more interesting, I think, than the console EQ would be. But if you're not running Waves, just do a similar thing with the console. Like just, boost some 10K, cut a little 240, boost a little bit of 50, and you will be in the same exact ballpark. Like this is not anything that's like, magical fairy dust on the kick or anything like that. But let's hear it off and then we'll turn it on. There's off. Yeah, sounds awesome. So I was like, okay, cool. That's the balance that I want. That's the presence that I want. That's the low end that I want. Then I want to compress it just a little bit. So the API 2500 is one of my favorite compressors for drums. It's really, really great. I'll start with the bypass and then turn it on for you. That's off and on. It almost doesn't sound different, right? It's so similar. So it's taken off, like 2 or 3 dB of compression. This drummer doesn't hit super hard, so I'm interested to see kind of how this will translate with a harder hitting drummer. But I think this is a good way to get started on it. But yeah, just when everything came together with, mixing these three inputs together as one unit, I realized like I didn't need compression on every single kick mic. I just needed it at this group. I'm making it work together as one unit. And then the exact same thing for the snare. So let's go through, listen to this. I'm going to solo up the snare just really quick so you can hear it. I'm going to disable my group processing. All right, so here's what's going on in the snare. There is a gate and an EQ. Okay, so this would be exactly what's happening on the console. Let's take a look. I'm going to turn it off. Turn the gate off as well. You know what? Let's go to a spot. We can do a different song. Let's go to where he's got a good little snare hit here. Okay. Okay, so it sounds good, right? It sounds like a snare. Turn that verb off for you so you don't have to hear that. Yeah, really solid. Okay, now what I'm hearing is a little bit of a lack of clarity. I think most of it's coming from this point in our low mids. I'll often find that with snare, there is like the fundamental, like the oomph of the drum, like the actual kind of note that it plays. And then usually about an octave above that, or maybe a little less depending, will be another kind of like ringy spot where it sounds kind of weird and boxy. We'll listen to that here in a second. I'm gonna turn on this EQ. Let's start with it off and then I'll turn it on. On. Off. And on. Okay, so we're talking about a very small change here. We're boosting like almost 4 dB right at the fundamental, and then we're cutting this. Let me actually hear what this sounds like, because this is something that I've noticed really can trip some people up and make your snare muddy and unclear. I'm doing almost a 10 dB cut here at this frequency, so check out what this sounds like. Hear how that like competes with the fundamental note of the drum? Like it doesn't sound bad until you take it away. And then you go, oh wow, I can really hear the drum now. Same thing with this mid-range cut. Check this out. This clacky, knocky sound. It doesn't sound bad. Then you cut it. And you're like, wow, the snare just comes to life. And then just a small upper mid boost right here, right around 5K. And that's just all we need. Let's go to our gate really quick. This is another one where I'm only reducing 10 dB in between snare hits. This is another thing where I just discovered, like, gosh, I feel like I'm over gating these drums. I'm relying maybe too much on the overheads to kind of fill out the sound of it. I want the close mics to also have a say in kind of the sound of the kit as a whole. So for me, I just really reduced that, and I think it sounds really, really good. So altogether, that sounded like this. Just a nice smacky snare. Okay, let's get our bottom snare in there. I'm gonna leave that top snare on, doing an identical EQ minus the top end boost on this bottom snare. You can hear that's already got more than enough top end like rattle in it. It's like a 40 strand snare wire, so it's like, yeah, we don't need to boost any more of that. But I think, yeah, having those two work together is really, really helpful in getting the snare to sound like cohesive and together. I think my big theme here is getting all these mics and instruments to work together rather than treating them as separate instruments. So again, exactly the same gate, slightly different threshold, just different mic. But again, no compression on that. And altogether, I think it sounds really fantastic. Especially when we add the reverb to it. Sounds pretty gigantic. So Okay, right here, this is our snare group. This is where a little more processing is gonna happen. Again, I opted to send this out to waves rather than doing it on the console, but you could get a near identical result just doing the console. I like some of these tools and I think they're fun. So first up is this, again, the API 550 BEQ. Here it is off and on. So again, this is just a little more like top end presence and a little more low end presence. You'll kind of maybe notice a theme there of just adding some highs, adding some lows, and that's kind of all it needs. Then over here on the 2500, I've got a 4:1 ratio. I've got a pretty slow attack at 10 milliseconds and a fairly fast release at 0.2 seconds. So let's hear what that sounds like. So that's adding some beef and some smack to it. Let's bypass it. And on. Yeah, that really makes it pop. One thing I will say that's a huge benefit on this, and actually on drums across the board, so on the 2500 compressor, I know we always, like, it's a rule, we turn off the analog switch, but I promise you, this is the one time on the 2500 is where you want to turn it on because it does something special. It engages a soft clipping feature, which is really useful for making like your snare, kick, drum kit as a whole not poke out too much and eat up all your headroom in your mix. It basically, it's sort of like just chops off the loudest part of the signal past a certain point. It doesn't sound noticeably different, but you will hear or you'll experience that you just don't have to worry as much about like a really loud, aggressive snare or kick poking out in the mix as much. So I like to turn that on. Okay, let's see. Dustin Thiessen is here. He was asking really quickly what snare mics we have here. Yes, so this really quick, just I'll run down through drum mics. So this is, kick in is the SE Electronics BL8, kick out is an Audix D6, snare top is the Lawton Audio snare mic, snare bottom is a 57, toms are all the Lawton Audio snare mic, or sorry, the Lawton Audio tom mic, and overheads are the Warm Audio WA14, which is just a clone of a C414. Okay, so that's where we're at with our snare. Now, I want to blend in this sample. This is a big punchy sample from my friends over at Drum Sample Shop. They're awesome. Shout out Peyton Hilliard and Johnny Bird. They're awesome guys. And they've got this sample. I think this is like maybe like an acrolite or something. But anyway, it sounds like this. Again, we're going super, super roomy. So we blend that together, the whole thing is gonna sound like this. So especially if you're listening on headphones right now, you may not be able to hear it as much on like an iPhone or laptop speakers, but it's adding a lot of width to the snare. And this is something I feel like we miss a lot of times in live mixes and especially on live streams. All of your favorite, recordings, albums, stuff like those recorded in a studio, they've got room mics set up for the drums to capture like the width of the drum kit in the room. And obviously on a stage, we don't really have that. So what I like to do with a trigger is to blend in something that's very, very roomy in order to just expand kind of like the stereo image of the snare. So, okay, cool. Let's listen to our kick and snare together. Yeah, sounds awesome. And so far, we've gotten all that with literally 1, 2, 3, 4 Waves plugins. That's it. Let's move on to toms. These will go a lot faster. Kick and snare will get a little bit complicated. Again, if you're just joining us, what we're doing here is we're taking a lot of these things that are like similar instruments and we're bussing them together onto one group channel and doing kind of like the meat of our processing together on that one group channel. I'm gonna grab a drink of water real quick, mouth getting dry. Don't want you guys to have to hear me like smacking over here. Okay, so toms, we're running almost identical processing on the console on each of these channels. So let's open up tom 1 here just so we can hear it. Let's see. Okay, let me bypass my little bit of waves processing here on the group. And actually, I'll bypass everything just to let you hear kind of initially what this sounded like. Let me jump back to, let's see, here's a Tommy part. Cool. They sound like toms. They sound pretty good. Not a ton of bleed. One thing I really like about the Lawton tom mics is that the bleed that does get into them doesn't sound atrocious. I feel like on stuff like the Sennheiser, like the MD421, super common tom mic, even some of the Audix tom mics, the bleed that gets into it just sounds so nasty. And I'm like, there's going to be bleed in a tom mic, and every mic on the kit is going to get bleed. So it's like, if it's going to be bleed, I want it to at least sound semi-natural and not like totally offensive. And I feel like that's one of the things that these Lawton mics do really, really well. So let's look at our processing on these. The biggest thing is a gigantic cut in the mid-range here. So this is happening on every tom. Literally all I did, so I EQ'd tom 1, and then I duplicated it, I copied over the processing, and then I grabbed it all and I just slid it down like that to where now this is like right at the fundamental of the drum. And that honestly just kind of worked perfectly. So it's like the exact same boosting. Yeah, you can literally see it right there. It's literally just scooting down in the frequency range. And that's all that's going on there. So let's listen to that. I'm going to turn... let's go back to the Mav City song. I think that was obviously has a lot of toms in it. Let's kind of listen through. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna engage all these EQs. Go a little louder for you. Let's take them off. There's off and on. So what we're getting there is just a lot of focus. It's this mid-range area. Let me, I'll show you on one. Let me pan it to the center so we're not just hearing it from one side. Okay, so check this out. If I jump in and I grab like these guys, let's hear what these sound like. So you hear that kind of clacky, just gross. That is not what we want. We want to hear the focus of that fundamental and the attack and like articulation of the high frequencies. And so that's really what I'm after here. Again, really, really simple EQ. We're only using, 3 bands and then my low cut over here. And that's it. And same thing. So again, with gating, I'm going with a 10 dB gate, not closing it down a ton. And let's hear what that sounds like. Let me get to a tommier part over here. Yep. So just open it up really nicely. Another thing you'll notice is that these toms are tuned really, really well. Say that a little bit to like toot my own horn. I tune them. I tune all of our drums all the time. And I think that makes a big difference. Like if you haven't tuned your drums in a minute, you really, really need to. We're actually going to drop a video on that probably early next week. So like and subscribe to get that when it comes out. Actually showing you exactly how I tune like these drums in particular, these 3 toms. And just make them sound really good to go through like head choices and everything with that. So make sure your toms are tuned really well. Make sure you can like distinguish the fundamental note so that you can kind of isolate it with your EQ here. But yeah, so that's all that's going on with those toms. So again, we're going just super, super simple. And finally, all these drums, all these toms get grouped down to a single group, where again, we're just launching the 550B and the API 2500. You can see a little, a little theme starting to happen here. And I just decided, like, especially like I'm not the only person who runs sound in my church. I want this to be simple and intuitive for our volunteers. And so I'm like, man, if I can use the same two processors on each of these, drum groups, that just makes the whole process so much simpler, rather than having to, like, okay, I used, the DBX 160 on the kick, and I used, the CLA 76 on the snare, and then a 2500 on the toms. Like, just keep it really simple, make a smaller set of tools do more work. That's kind of what we're going for with this whole approach, is doing more with less stuff and making it less complicated. So I'm going to bypass these. They've been bypassed as you're listening to. I'm just going to open them up here and bypassing them. Okay, so here's what we get with our EQ. Again, same theme. I'm adding 4 dB at 150, 4 dB at 10K. Just a little more clarity, a little more impact. Then, oh yeah. Yeah, that compressor, that makes stuff it gives it the oomph, that's one of those ones, like, it does have some sauce to it, as I like to say. Okay, so that's taking care of all of our drum mics. This is kind of the biggest thing for me. Oh, except for overheads. Let's get to those real quick. That's important stuff. Gotta have overheads. So really quickly, my overhead philosophy, right? You can see, again, very simple EQ move we're gonna be doing here at the console. So the way that I think about overheads, I don't like them as just like a cymbal mic. I want them to pick up the entire kit and give like a picture of the kit kind of like all together, and bring everything, like tie everything together. I think especially with this strategy that we're doing now of kind of grouping things together and processing groups of mics together, this is even more important, that it's not, trying to isolate one element of the kit. One element of the kit. We want it all to work together. And these mics, these overheads, are a big part of how that works. So there's not going to be a ton going on here. There is obviously no gate on the overheads. I think there is, a little bit of compression. So let's check this out. So we have got our EQ right here and our compressor. I'm going to bypass both, and let's listen to what that sounds like. And that's the whole mix. Hang on one second. Let's go ahead, solo that. There we go. Okay, so this is our overheads in solo. Make them a little louder for us. They sound awesome, just like out of the box. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, these are some of my favorite overhead mics. They're the Warm Audio WA14. I think they might sound better than an actual AKG C414. That's just me. So what I want to do, I'm taking out a little bit of kind of the harsh, like right around like 3K, 3.2K, and then a little bit of kind of like muddiness I was hearing around 450. Let's hear what that sounds like. So here's off and on. So this frequency was kind of this just very aggressive mid-range, and this was muddy. Turning it off, really subtle difference. Turn it back on. Helps out a little bit with that crash ride that he's on right there. That's probably mostly what that particular move was for, is for that specific cymbal. Then over here on compressor, I'm gonna compress overheads a little bit. I want them to get a little bit punchy. Let's check this out. So what I'm wanting this to do is kind of tuck the snare into the overhead mix as a whole. Snare and even toms poke out a little bit more, just in the overhead mix as a whole. And I want them to kind of like just popped back down. So I'm going fast attack, pretty fast release, 4-to-1 ratio, and just letting that kind of just zip down every time the snare or toms hits, and just kind of keeping those under control. Okay, overheads and cymbals as a whole. There's actually there's no waves processing on the cymbal bus right now. That's something that could change, but just like with it just being overheads right now, like if I add in a couple more like cymbal spot mics that go into this group, I might do some more group processing on that. But for now, it's just there to exist as a group with no additional processing on it. Okay, let's hear our drums all together one more time and then talk about the two drum channels here, like drum dry and drum comp. Let's hear it all together. Yeah, just sounds really, really good. Let me know in the comments, make sure that's all loud enough. Anything else we're hearing that needs to change during the stream, just let me know in the comments. Oh yeah, Diego says, yeah, check out the Flea mics. Yeah, Flea 46 mic is insane. Yes, it is awesome. I've used that in the studio a couple times, and yeah, it's really, really great. Probably really cool live too. Okay, so I've got two channels. So how this is working, all of my drums go to this drums dry bus. And the only thing that's happening on here is another API 2500 compressor. Oh, there we go. Let's make it nice and big. Okay, so I've got this on a 4-to-1 ratio, the slowest attack, and then a fairly fast release, 0.2 seconds, 200 milliseconds. And yeah, this is 30 milliseconds on the attack. So let's hear just what this is doing. I'm going to mute, got the drums, the compressed parallel channel muted. So we're just hearing the drums dry here. Let's check this out. Start with it off. And on. Sounds almost identical, right? That's kind of the point of this. We're not trying to do anything super crazy. If you were like really, really lay in, like do a big build or something, you might see this needle jump to like, -2, -3 if he's like really like crushing something. But otherwise, it's gonna be pretty chill. Then let's bring in our drums compressed channel. So once again, I'm using the 2500 compressor. So this time it's gonna look a little different. We're going with a very fast attack at 0.1 millisecond release, going a slightly faster, 0.1 millisecond attack, and I guess that's a 0.1 second release. So let's hear what just this sounds like. I'm gonna mute our drums dry. So we're just hearing the drum comp channel now. Bring that up so you can hear it a little better. So it sounds weird, right? It's like, it's super like attacky, punchy, got a lot of what I would call movement from the compressor. And so really, I mean, if we're honest here, this is like we're over compressing it. We're doing too much. And that's on purpose because we're then going to blend it with the drums dry. So I'm going to start with, so this is our drums dry fader. This is our drums compressed fader. And I'm going to bring this in. You're going to hear how it kind of just like fattens things up. It gives it more attack, more presence, and just like some more like energy to it. So here we go. Actually, I wonder if we can even get to a bigger part of the song here. Actually, maybe I'll go back to, so he's playing that like straighter beat here. Okay, so that's all dry. Let's bring in the compressed. Yeah, sounds awesome. Let me mute that. Still sounds good. But that sounds better. Yeah, that sounds super cool. Okay, we had a question. Let's see. Rocketeer Games is asking, question about the snare. Lots of the EQ and compression here on CCM records seems to cater to big single snare hits, but always sounds a little weird when they do the light drumline snare pattern. Yeah, okay, so it's time to talk about the dirty little secret of record mixing. So a lot of what you're hearing, if you're listening to something like recorded, is going to be sampled. And that is just the reality, for better or for worse. They're using a program like Trigger, like a plugin, to basically like re-sample the snare and like layer in a sample pretty heavily. And sometimes that it adds a really big sense of, space and depth and impact. And it's like this, incredible snare hit that just sounds unbelievably good. The problem with that is it doesn't always sound natural. So you'll even hear maybe on some people's live streams where it's mostly a snare sample. I don't really like that approach. Obviously, like we talked about, I do have a snare sample in here, but it's less than like the top snare and bottom snare combined here. So like, let's go ahead. I've got everything balanced with this, but so I basically just turn it up if I wasn't using the sample. Let's hear what it would sound like though. So I'm going to play it here for us. Okay, now let's bring down. So that's kind of how I would approach it if I wasn't running a sample. I'd literally just pull down the sample and then push the snare a little bit louder, and that's all it would take for that. But that is something that we have at our church. It's super easy to do. You can get the Roland TM2 as like $100 and fire a sample. But yes, that is why it sounds like that. And the thing with triggers is they don't always pick up like rolls and stuff very well. So when like you're talking about kind of the like drumline snare pattern, that is why it doesn't always sound super natural, is because the sample is either not firing during that part, so it just sounds really different, or they're letting the snare sample fire and it just doesn't sound very natural. So yep, that is what's happening there. Okay, so I'm gonna move quickly through the rest of these instruments. I know we're already at like an hour here. I want to respect y'all's time, but really quickly, I'm gonna grab all my other instruments here. So this is bass, this is electric guitars, acoustic guitar, keys, and tracks. And all of these are going to my band bus down here. So we've got our drum bus, our vocal bus, and our band bus. So all of those feed directly to our mains. So it's kind of like three different things that end up hitting our mains. And it's drums, it's all the rest of the band, and it's the vocals. So let's just hear what this sounds like all together. And then I'll show you the very minimal moves that I'm making in Waves to kind of make this happen. So let's get back. This is probably a good spot. So this is The Blood, this song. It's a really, really great song, but let's hear what's going on in this part. Nice and balanced. That's really what I'm going for. We're not running a ton of tracks or anything, so there's not a ton that's going on there. Okay, so here's how I'm kind of getting everything balanced there. So all of my processing, for the most part, a couple little exceptions, is happening like on the console. So the only things I'm doing in Waves, I'm adding the CLA2A, just a nice compressor for bass, and then this bass player happened to have like a very clean tone, and I wanted to dirty it up a little bit, so I used this saturator, the Waves Abbey Road saturator, to do that. On electric guitars, let me just isolate those for a second. I do really like the Renaissance Axe compressor, and it's this guy right here. There's the other one. If I disable those, it just gets a little thinner. It just does something about 3 dB of compression that just makes stuff sound nice and fat. Then over here on acoustic guitar, a little louder. LA3A. You can hear his guitar has like an actual mic inside of it. So yeah, it's kind of, you hear some bleed from that. But yeah, this sounds really good. Again, it just makes it fatter. Let's turn that off and on. Especially as he digs in there, that's really nice. Okay, so that's it. Nothing on keys. Let's see, yeah, a little bit of EQ, just a low cut filter, a little bit of a low mid cut on that. So then the magic is going to happen here, or honestly, maybe not even magic, maybe just good processing is going to be at the band bus right here. So let me solo all that stuff again so we can kind of hear it all together. And what we've got first is a C6. This is the Pooch mix bus setting. It just sounds really good. Takes care of some problem areas, keeps our low end in check, keeps everything nice and balanced. But if we turn it off, not a huge difference. And then an F6. Okay, this is cool. Okay, so straight up, I stole this from Tyler Kirkpatrick. Go follow him on Instagram. He's awesome. Okay, so what this is doing is an F6 with a single band that is side chained to the vocals. So basically when the vocals come in, it dips the band in the upper mids and it lets the vocals come through better. It's very cool. Let's see, I will solo vocals so you can kind of see that working. Yeah, literally it just ducks it a little bit when the vocals come in. It just kind of clears things up a little bit. So that's it on the band. There's nothing crazy going on there, which is awesome. I love that. Let me jump back over. See, I kind of had this mix set for... Cool. Okay, so last but not least is vocals. Over here at the console, I did processing identically for every vocal channel just as a starting point. So I've got my low cut up to 260. Above that, a little bit of a dip at 490, right around 500. And then right around 2K, another little dip, just kind of even stuff out. And then a small like 3 dB boost at the top end starting around 3K. So let's solo... maybe just one of these. Whoop. I'm my own giant. Oh God, my God, I need you. Okay, so that's all that's happening at the console there. So this is one where I do like some wave stuff going on. We've got waves tune, just in like the default settings, and obviously the key is selected. Then we have two compressors. We have the CLA2A and the CLA76. They work back to back. So the CLA2A gets just a couple dB of compression, and the 76 gets a ton of compression. So check this out. Face collide, but I've got my own giant. Oh God, my God, I need you. So anywhere between like 5 to 10 dB on the 76 and just a couple dB on the 2A. Fast attack, fast release on this. This guy doesn't have attack and release controls. I just set the peak reduction to where you get a couple dB. After that, we have a de-esser, just a very simple, just, basic stock de-esser, kicks in when he sings an S. Finally, we have the smallest move on the F6. Face collide, but I've got my own giant. That's really just there to catch any like low resonances. So if he like sings lower in his register, that's going to come in and just kind of zip it down a little bit and keep that low frequency stuff under control. Or if he like gets right up on the mic and there's a lot of low frequency stuff coming in. So that's really it, guys. I hope it's probably gone a little bit longer than I anticipated it going, but that's okay. I think it's good to talk about all this stuff, and we may take we'll like dive into this at some point. because we're kind of just like scratching the surface. So I hope this has been super helpful for you guys. I hope it maybe inspires you to take a look at your mix and the way you've been doing stuff, so far, and maybe just kind of evaluate, like, is there a simpler, better way to do things? Is there a way to, maybe like process groups of channels together and get more mileage out of that than processing everything individually? Just before we sign off here, obviously, like and subscribe, love that. And if you like the way that we teach, you want more in-depth teaching, go to worshipsoundguy.com. We have courses, we have presets, we have our insiders group where there will be a replay of this over at worshipsoundguy.com/insiders. So make sure you join that. And until next time, happy mixing. We'll see you next week for another edition.